Hi everyone, Tea Drinker here, and today I'm reacting to Black Sails Season 3, Episode 5. This reaction will be a highlight reel of my first time watching the episode, and then the review will be a scene-by-scene analysis following my rewatch. I'm loving this show so far, I am so excited to watch even more. I can't believe that after this episode there's only going to be 15 left, and only 5 left of the season itself. But nonetheless, I am so excited to just get right into it, and that's exactly what I am going to do.
I saw a dead dog lying in the grass when I was young.
Same. Oh. I wonder if Mr. Scott has rolled onto the island yet, and that's where the horn is coming from. Oh my god, they're giving it to us right away. Wow. Okay. Let's rock and roll. There we go. Talk about a great setup, am I right? And here we have Vane and the boys. What's going on? What's happening here? I'm still not sure how I feel about Teach at this particular juncture. Like, we're being given all the indication that he's going to be a good person to Vane, but...
Colors.
A red herring?
Spanish.
Oh, the Spanish. Interesting that they would
Signal of the fleet.
reach Teach at this point. I was so concerned about Nassau and Spain, I didn't even consider Vane getting there first. Just so much has changed from the dynamic back in Season 1.
You were dead.
For as long as I have known you, you've been two wholly separate men.
Skill recognizing skill, I suppose.
Until now.
A partnership?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Who said that?
That's what I was thinking this is gonna go.
He has authority here, but he doesn't have the final word.
Still, they're in a much better place than they were before. That goes without saying.
Concerns about our trustworthiness remain.
My lord.
Hornigold?
You have it. The Commodore will take control of the structure and ready to go for transport to Havana.
But it's not the full amount, so what's gonna happen there?
If you want me to help you play that game, I need to know where all the players are.
I see.
And will we get to see where the players are? Is this our boy Jack, wherever they are? Oh, Featherstone. Well, I suppose he has to accept a pardon, hasn't he?
Congratulations.
I mean, it's how I'd react as well.
I sincerely hope this doesn't diminish your attraction to me.
That was great. That was really good. There was great camera work there. Red really suits her.
So I suppose you haven't been here long enough to know how to sit in that chair. So here you are.
Subtext. And the fact that they used to be lovers as well, just the character progression is fantastic. From a pacing point of view, I love the way we just cut right into the fighting, no preamble, just straight into it. I think that's really cool. Slice him down. Oh.
But if I, for a moment, doubt him...
And both of them have their guard up.
Trust me to make this decision.
Oh, the scene is going to be so tense when it happens.
Shall I come back?
You?
It's so nice he has a daughter. Not that I think it would happen, but I really hope he doesn't die this episode. I really like Scott. I don't want anyone to die, this is the thing. I literally do not want anyone to die. For whatever it brings the story. That's a great actor, by the way. It's all money. Yeah. It's all money. A wife and kids, great callback to 201 with Lo and the ship on the cold opening. Don't ask me why, but I got mad Resident Evil vibes just with that little moment there. What is it? I have no idea what it could be. Great cliffhanger. I'm truly stumped as to what it is they're burning. What is this woman going to do? How is she going to be important? That's what I'm wondering.
Understand. Not as far as Spain knows.
Yeah.
As far as anyone knows.
Very,
the
very
entirety of the
clever.
Spanish gold was
Very,
captured today
very
and fought by
clever.
your men. And this?
Love Max.
No history.
She's so clever.
Only a future.
The purchase of a
in
clean
which you
slate.
and I are truly friends.
What is gonna happen here?
I'm ensuring that no one will ever think you the villain you fear you are.
The fuck you say to me?
What a waste it seems to me.
James versus Flint, hero versus villain. Just loving this story. Loving this show. Are we gonna get another daydream? We gonna see Miranda again? Okay, right, what's gonna happen? The episode opening with the image of death was not the cheeriest of setups. I am so excited. What's gonna happen? What's gonna happen? Alright, let's go. Let's do it. What? What has he carved into the stone? I'm assuming he's carved something into the stone. What is it? Oh! Oh, Flint. How much I love you. And the cinematography, like, are you kidding me?
That England takes whatever, whenever, however it wants.
England as a benevolent force. So good, so good, so good.
Is that not exactly the sort of place that could replace this?
It's a fantastic shot, by the way.
That you could settle?
I love the framing.
Settle? But could be awoken.
Yeah,
That I could awaken.
yeah. Flint is the only option.
to do that?
They turned when they thought I was gone.
Mmm.
So I will come back from the dead and lay claim to what I am owed.
That line is insane.
For every man in your camp, there are thousands
Yeah.
somewhere in the West
I knew
Indies
he was going to say
living
that.
under the same yoke. By an alliance of pirates and slaves.
Yes.
How many consider joining that fight?
I mean, this is terrifying,
Thousands of men
just to make that clear, but
will flock
you know what
to
I mean when I
Nassau.
say yes.
Join your ranks. Maybe bring it all down.
Incredible writing. Both for dialogue and for plot, just insane.
We don't.
Oh, I am so excited to see what happens with Vane's character this season.
How did they learn anything about him so quickly?
Well, the same way they do all British governors in the Americas.
Oh, just seeing that seed planted in his head. Terrific.
This feels different.
Very interesting parallel in the discussions of money between here and then Vane when he was talking to the man on the Spanish ship. Given his position and how his life has been destroyed by all this is very interesting backstory for him. It's a great amount of debt.
I'm sorry, were you summoned?
What is she doing? Literally thought she was lunging for a gun there.
Please forgive me, and said his employers wished to monitor your operation to retake Nassau.
Okay, here we go.
They had a vested interest, which seemed perfectly legitimate.
She's a great actor, by the way.
They offered me a significant amount of money.
Yeah, yeah. What's gonna happen? What's gonna happen? Give it to me, give it to me, give it to me.
The man's name is Juan Antonio Grandal.
Spanish had him
And
from the
his
beginning.
employer exchanged a significant portion of the Urca de Lima's prize
Oh,
gold
oh.
for more portable commodities.
And the fact that we got his backstory like right before this happening.
Away with their money without them knowing of it.
Oof. God, I love this show.
A scheme they find most insulting.
Mm-hmm. And this really careful
I was
push
very
in on his
honest to
face.
give you and that is only half of it.
Yeah. Please don't end. Oh. Jack and Anne, like, usually I am happy to see you, but I really wanted to see what would happen after. Okay.
Gift to Port Royal.
Because of legacy?
I do. With everything I've lost in recent days,
Yeah.
I can't afford to lose the name too.
Jack.
Not when it is so there. If that is the case, then there is certainly pardons for us too.
Jack, you're insane.
And we win.
Oh, Jack, please. Please
You wanna
don't
go back?
succumb to these ideas.
You stay.
No.
It's better that way.
No.
Watch the money.
No.
Return within a few hours.
No. Oh, Jack, you're an idiot.
Promise.
You're the dumbest smart person I've ever seen. It's just petulance at this point. Did it work? Surely not. Not this quickly. You're kidding me. Huh. Huh. I mean, it was a hell of an argument he had.
Please don't take this the wrong way. But I didn't think there was a chance in hell that was actually going to work.
For opening that door.
Oh, how I love these guys. Truly.
Now, we marshal whatever resources we can. As many ships as we can.
Oh my god.
Men resolved to defy the pardon and ready to join a war. Now we go find Charles Vane.
Fantastic episode. Fantastic episode. I loved it. Absolutely loved it. And if you're watching me at this point, then I suppose all there is to say is that the review is going to start now. Alright, so let's get into the review for Season 3, Episode 5. Our very first scene, we get yet another hallucination from Flint involving Miranda, and now this time around we see Death really up close and personal. I think it's really good the way they have Death as a character kind of slowly. I spilled a bit of tea, and it hurt my tummy a bit, but I'm okay. It's really interesting how we see Death introduced kind of gradually bigger and bigger and bigger for Flint, as he is, of course, learning to deal with the loss. Having Miranda say, I think the exact line is her saying, "You're not alone in this, and you don't even realize it yet." I'm kind of curious about that. Is it because, this is totally spitballing, is it because he realizes that the crewmen are also going through their own form of loss, and they too have to come to some shape or form of, emotional resolution with that? Or is it because there's going to be somebody else who's going to help Flint on his journey in dealing with the loss that he feels? In any way, I think it's like even the dialogue he was saying when he talks about like seeing the dead dog when he was a child and the flies across the face, how he is haunted by death. As a person who has to spend such a significant amount of his life basically killing people or making decisions that results in people being killed. Death is all around Flint, and grief is the type of thing that never truly goes away. So now you're thinking, it really just seems like death in and of itself is the spectre haunting Flint. So there isn't necessarily anything new, I'd say, we're learning there. It's just another reinforcement of that particular notion for the characters, and I thought it was really well done. And again, I don't think I mentioned it that much before, but from a production point of view, the color palette that's used for these dream sequences, I think it's a good choice. It's just muted enough where it has that otherworldly, ghostly feel. It is very kind of gothic, very kind of 18th century look to it. So, strong opening. The very short scene in which we see Mr. Scott brought in on a stretcher, I mentioned it in the reaction, but I was quite pleasantly surprised to see them going in with this storyline so quick. We're getting so much out of Season 3, and I'm still kind of really, really amazed by how well the pacing was. I mentioned before in the review for 304 that on my initial watch, I kind of felt maybe it was a little bit slower than the others, and then rewatching it and understanding how complex the conversations with Flint and Maddie were in that episode, I realized, no, they're giving us so much. So to see Scott being brought in this early into the episode, when I was doing the reaction, when I was watching it for the first time, it kind of set me up with high expectations for the rest of the episode, and yeah, they were met. So after that, we get the episode's setup scene with Vane and Teach, in which there's an interesting bit of dialogue there, where Teach talks about how, from his perspective, it isn't a woman itself that clings to you, it's more the mark she leaves in you. In other words, that the effect Eleanor Guthrie has had on Vane is what's going to last longer than Eleanor herself could possibly. And yeah, again, we get a reiteration of the conversation in which Vane is saying quite explicitly to Teach, like, Eleanor has not done this to me. I am ready to leave Nassau once and for all. So for them to bring it up kind of that explicitly would then make me think, had I not seen the rest of the episode, I would think that we're getting some sort of setup that there's either going to be some sort of growth or change in which he's going to absolutely definitively want to kill her or something like that altogether, or there's going to be something that changes throughout the course of the episode in which he's going to start to relent on his feelings, which I think would be interesting if it's the latter, given that rather than having his progression of a character be a total smooth path for there to be bumps on the way, and especially for him to necessitate walking back certain ideas only to then move forward again, I think would be really strong. And I think something like that is going to be evident with this season, with the likes of Jack, which we see towards the end of the episode. I'll get to that when I get to it. But yeah, as it stands, I think I like seeing introductions to scenes such as that. I like seeing scenes that introduce character setups like that, because then it makes you think that it could genuinely go either way. So we had the scene between Flint and Mr. Scott, which I absolutely loved. Probably saw as much in the reaction that I loved the parallel of Flint saying that, you know, you've been two different men all this time, and who else to say that, only Flint. But I think it's great to have that amount of lore about Mr. Scott, and indeed having the world building to do with what life is like for the black inhabitants of Nassau, and just indeed this world in general. How difficult it is for them to navigate life post-slavery, and even the idea of him saying that not even Elle knew that I had a wife and a daughter, and whatever psychological torment Scott would have to endure as a result of all that. And I think for him to show that much resolve, it's something that seems so in line with the character that we knew. I said it many a time that within season 1, Mr. Scott was definitely one of my favorite characters, even though he didn't necessarily have a huge amount of screen time. I think it's because a character like him, who is forced to have so much dignity in the wake of being expected and forced to have such a lack of dignity, is a really, really compelling character. And all I can say at this particular juncture is that I do hope we see more of him. I don't think he's built to be kind of one of the main characters of the show. I don't think it'll end up going that way. I mean, never say never. There's 15 episodes left, anything could happen. But nonetheless, for his place as one of the supporting characters in the show, I think is doing a terrific job of illustrating the world of Black Sails. Following this, we get a very interesting setup scene for the episode. We get a plot setup with Flint in that he is the one that it's going to have to negotiate with the Queen in order to make everything better again. But it is interesting because that is leading directly off of the heels of what Sylvie was talking to Maddie about in 304, in that if the two of us have the opportunity to put our forces together, would that not be of benefit for everybody? And we have the scene in which Flint is showing to the men that he has this knife prepared to kill the Queen if it comes to it. And what I think is really interesting is that, and bear in mind, I am fully aware of how the episode ends, particularly with the dialogue between Sylvie and Flint. Nonetheless, I think it's very interesting if you consider it to be an ambiguous intention there as to whether or not Flint was telling the men that he has this knife and he's ready to kill the Queen in order to save all the rest of the men. If he's doing that because he genuinely was considering that to be a plan, or he was saying something to put the men's minds at ease, that from the very beginning, like even before he walked back into this cage and told the men what's going on, that before all that he had it set in his mind that I am not going to succumb to violence, I am not going to do that at this particular juncture of my life, that I have to put on a bit of a performance in order for the men to be convinced. Now, from a logical point of view, I don't actually think that's the case. From a logical point of view, I think it is far more realistic to say that he did actually have a plan. Pardon me, he did actually have a fully formed backup plan to attack the Queen as a last resort, but he didn't want that to happen. From a realistic point of view, I do think it is safe to say that the whole knife thing was a serious backup plan and it wasn't performed, but I just think it would be interesting to consider a what if, given the fact that if we're to see Flint progressing more and more as a character, that even for him to do something with the knife is going to be something he feels like he has to do just to set the men's minds at ease, but he has no intention of doing. But at the very least, I think it's obvious that he reconsiders because we see what happens. But at the very least, you could say that his reluctance to do that in and of itself speaks so much as how he's changed as a character since episode 1. And this is only episode 5. I have no idea where this show is going to go with Flint, but I am hooked on every single scene with him. Like, I really, really am. I do not say it enough how utterly compelled I am by Flint as a character, just in television in general, not even just particularly in this show, just in a TV show as a whole, how completely there I am with Flint. Next, we have the scene with Elle and the governor, in which there's a nice kind of like conversation back and forth with the two of them. We start to see a little bit more and more of the governor's personality shine through as they talk. We have Hornigold confirm that the fort has been taken control of and says that we found a sizable fortune, but of course we know that sizable does not mean entire fortune. That's going to come later. We have another interesting bit of dialogue there where Elle is talking to the governor, asking about she asks Hornigold about the whereabouts of Jack and Anne, and when the governor asks what her motivation is behind that, Elle says that this is a game and I need to know where all the players are. So I think that that's a good reinforcement and continuation of what was spoken about in the previous episode, of her being very conscious of the social dynamic of Nassau, that them acquiring the legal and, I suppose you could say, the physical defense of Nassau in one way, as well as an economic way. On top of that, Elle is so focused on the social dynamic of Nassau, and if that doesn't fall into the fold as well, then everything else is basically just for nothing. So I think that it's, from a storytelling point of view, the writers are making it very, very clear that they are adhering to the parameters of the story that they themselves have set up. I mean, it's just really, really great. I think what makes Black Sail so strong is the fact that it is very much tied to historical accuracy, that everything we're seeing is within the parameters of the politics of colonialization, and how the characters interact with one another and what their motivations are going to, again, operate within the parameters of how things just used to be back then. So, for me, I think it's a real asset to the show. So, right before we get to the scene of Max and Elle speaking to one another, I just have to quickly mention the scene with Featherstone and Edel, in which I'm using that moment as the thumbnail. Again, as I've said many a times, I love the show for having genuine restraint when it comes to comedy, because it then means that when they actually do put jokes into the show, that the jokes genuinely land. And the look that she gives Max when Featherstone says that is just absolutely priceless. I really, really love that. So then we get that scene of Max and Elle speaking to one another. I kind of spent a bit of time just going through it again once or twice just to make sure I got every single line. And as I said in the reaction, I just think it's amazing to see how far these two girls have come, that where we saw them in the series' very first episode and to where they are now. Max delivering that line, "People do not speak to me that way anymore," the amount of resolve she has, the amount of commitment she has to Nassau, versus the commitment Elle has to ideals, even when those ideals change, but the fact that she will commit to them either way. It truly is a case of two very strong forces coming up against one another. I think that Elle has shown so much resolve to Rogers and to England itself that it's unlikely that she is going to falter at this point. But I'd be interested to see between the two of them, between Max and Elle, which one of them is going to be the one that would maybe succumb to compromise between both of them. And I think the fact that the scene ends with both of them saying, "Did you betray me here? No. Did you betray me here? No," is a good indication of how these are two enemies, for lack of a better term, that are formidable, that each one of them have kind of met their match in that kind of a way. But at the end of the day, both of them are trying to secure for themselves, well, just that, security. They're trying to make something that will last. And though I don't think that Elle may have, well, I suppose it's open to interpretation whether or not Elle was genuinely threatening Max in that situation. But I definitely think there is a part of, I think that Elle truly believes her own lies, for lack of a better term of putting it. So very excited to see what's going to happen between the two of them for the rest of the season. Next, you have the short scene in which we see Vane and Teach and the rest of their crew fighting the Spanish, and how Vane allows one of them to live in order to hear what he has to say. This is a short scene, so there's not much to talk about very much in depth here, only to say that, as you saw in the reaction, I was quite surprised to see just how quickly Vane and Teach were willing to go directly into a firefight with the Spanish. And again, it does create a very interesting contrast to the likes of what our guys may have done, or indeed what the likes of the English are even capable of thinking of, let alone actually doing, given the fact that Vane and Teach aren't tied down to having to appease Nassau anymore. They are truly, they're in a greater sense of freedom now because of that. Following this, we go back to the island of Marooners, in which we see Scott speak both to his wife and to his daughter Maddie. I think the conversation he had with the wife, to me, stood out as a very strong piece of writing for the show from a structural point of view, in that because we have it made explicit to us that Flint's plot line has been acknowledged by what I suppose could be called the antagonist force, in the sense of her very much openly acknowledging that I will do my best to understand this person, that for us it gives us a good indication that Flint actually has a chance of winning this thing, because we know what it does there from a writing perspective is it tells us that he is either very short-winded or something drastic is going to happen to stop it, given the case that she herself has presented herself as a very reasonable person. I mean, my God, out of all the leaders in Black Sails we've seen so far, I don't think we've actually met a more reasonable person than her, in the sense that she has every reason to not trust the pirates, but she also has every logical reason to listen to an argument as to why they should acquiesce, given everything Scott has told her, and given everything that she knows about the situation. And again, she's coming across, she does not have a lot of pride about it, she just has a conviction of saying, look, I will do what I can to make the best out of the situation, and to hear everything he says and to look him in the eye. I think, as a character, just for me as an audience member, that comes across as incredibly likable. That comes across in the sense that when she speaks, I will listen to every word, because she's presenting herself as being very, very rational. So you have that, but then followed by a very moving scene with the daughter, in which she speaks about, the reason I spoke to these men, frankly, is because these are the men that you surrounded yourself with. I know you very, very little. And, in so many words, she's talking about learning about the lives of these men is, in a way, vicariously learning more about you. And seeing them then hold hands with one another was very, very moving as well. So I think the scene does a great job in setting up. It establishes the stakes for Flint's plot point, as well as giving us more context and a little bit of, I don't know if you'd use the term world building, but I suppose maybe you could say just giving us extra details and extra clues as to what it is that is going to happen when we eventually get to that scene later on in the episode. And I think having, again, with inverted commas, the antagonist of Flint's plot point to be an incredibly reasonable person, then to me that makes the stakes so much higher, because then it's like you're not trying to win over a person, you're trying to actively win over logic, you're trying to win over the truth, you're trying to make a case that stands against the reality of the situation itself. And in a more abstract way, this isn't speaking about what Black Sails is trying to do, but just more so my own interpretation. Having seen Flint fight against reality so much, as that's made explicit in Flint and Sylvie discussing as such in 303, having Flint now having to, kind of fight reality, but in the means of, by means of him actually adhering to reality and logic itself, I think is very, very strong from a writing point of view. Following this, we see something of a moral dilemma that Sylvie is in. Seems to be all he's doing these days, in which he really does have to place his faith in Flint doing the right thing, in the sense of, if he does sacrifice himself, it is going to lead to all of us escaping. But Sylvie does not want that to happen as much as Billy does. Billy is very focused on survival, and I don't necessarily think it's a case of Sylvie just wanting his friend to live or anything on that kind of surface level. I think it's deeper in the sense that, well, again, Sylvie and Billy are clashing heads over to what degree can we truly trust Flint to save us. And Billy bringing up that point that Flint sacrificing himself might be the one selfless thing he's actually done since we've known him was a great bit of dialogue, and it really, really frames the way Flint is perceived amongst the men of our crew. So Sylvie is very much stuck between a rock and a hard place, and he's left static because of that. It's because he can't interfere with Flint in this scenario, but what else can he do? There's no way forward unless Flint talks to the Queen, but there's also no way forward unless we do have that backup plan. So for as much as Sylvie can be against this, I think Billy was, once again, coming through as the voice of reason in this scenario. That if we do stand any chance of this, we do have to let Flint sacrifice himself in the way that he does. So I think, given that several scenes down the line we're going to see Ben Gunn discover that the knife has been left behind, I can only imagine what would be going through Sylvie's, well, I don't have to imagine, Sylvie makes that clear by the end of the episode, but nonetheless, I think that it was great writing in seeing that amidst all, because the plot in and of itself, the A plot in and of itself is strong enough, so to have this kind of B plot brought in as to how Sylvie himself is supposed to deal with all this going on, given everything that they've been through, is really terrific stuff. So the following scene, in which we get Vane speaking to the captain of the Spanish ship, who subsequently dies of his wounds, as Teach and his men are below deck discovering what it is that this ship is harbouring to begin with. We get the very vague dialogue from the Spanish captain, which has us guessing as to what it is the ship is actually holding. We subsequently find out that it's information the ship has garnered and is trying to maintain its confidentiality about. But I think it still built a great deal of suspense, because I think for us as audience members who are really paying attention to Black Sails with the type of show it is, for it to have this big build up and then it turns out to be information, rather than something more physically violent or physically threatening, for us and for a show like Black Sails that works, it works in a way where it doesn't feel cheap. It doesn't feel like we've been given a fake out or we've been given some sort of false emotional response, because it is quite an intense situation. And I think that a lesser show, a more kind of melodramatic, more poorly written show, if they tried to pull off something like that, it really would have come across as cheap. It really would have come across as false tension for the sake of it. But for a show like Black Sails, where it is doing those type of beats, it comes across as very authentic. And to me, that's just kind of how I feel about screenwriting in general, is that every single, particularly with television, where there has to be way more of a structure than cinema, because otherwise then the TV show just, it doesn't get made. Even the likes of, Twin Peaks: The Return still had to adhere to such a structure amidst all the stuff that show was doing. That how I feel about screenwriting in this context is that when you are doing these familiar beats, when you are doing these tropes and these structures and these formulas and these arcs that are all so well known and so tried and true, that when you're able to deliver those beats and it doesn't take you out of the show, that you still are compelled every single step of the way, is a sign of how great the writing is. It's very similar to songwriting, I think, in that if you have a pop song where you know that it's going to be within a particular 4 or 5 chord structure, that you know it's going to be adhering to a very strict verse, chorus, bridge, chorus formula, that when something is so locked down to a structure and to a framework, and you're still able to get so much creativity out of there and so much commitment to what it is you're trying to create, that it's a testament to your prowess as an artist. So yeah, once again, I just gotta hand it to Black Sails. So our scene in which Max is speaking to Governor Rogers and Elle is there in the background about how she is going to initiate this deal with Rogers in order for her to, basically have her slate wiped completely clean, and for both of them to have a shape or form of partnership for Nassau moving forward, I thought was absolutely brilliant. I mean, again, if you saw the reaction, you would have seen just how completely giddy I was to see that interaction take place. But again, I just adore Max. I really, really do. If I were to rank the characters, honestly, as it stands, I think it goes Flint, Jack, and then Max, Vane, kind of tied with one another. She's incredible. She's just absolutely incredible. For her to have so much savviness from the introductory episodes of this show, and for that to continue as her actual career just kind of climbs and climbs and climbs and climbs and climbs. And similar to the Queen of the Marooners, she is incredibly reasonable. I don't think I could actually add so much more to that scene. I mean, of course, from a storytelling point of view, kind of like looking at things from, of course, the episodic arc as well as the seasonal arc, we know that it's not going to go this way. We know that that all is not what it seems insofar as the particular safety that they have procured for themselves, and for the show to give us those shots of the woman with the red hair who's hanging in the background and who's aware of everything that's going on. We saw her there as Elle and Max made their way up the stairs, and of course in the previous episode listening in through the door. We know that this plan is eventually going to fail for reasons that are outside of any of our characters' control, but nonetheless, at this particular juncture, what Max is doing and how she's presenting herself and the way she's thinking and the way she's able to even put her anger aside to her anger towards Elle, she's able to put that aside in order to put her best foot forward, I think is just terrific writing. It's terrific writing as it is just more reinforcement and more screen time given to one of my favorite characters in the entire show. Okay, so I'm going to be honest with you. It's been a day since I've watched 305. I shot that reaction yesterday and I'm doing the review today. I completely forgot about this scene between Sylvie and Flint. I actually completely forgot that scene actually happened, and I think it's so interesting that Sylvie, pretty much in the same breath, says that, not only can you convince the crew to believe anything you want, but you can convince that the Marooners to believe anything you want, if you wanted to. So I think that Sylvie is in a way kind of he's going against Sylvie's wishes to not interfere with the whole thing, but he's doing so in quite an amicable way. And I think where both of these men are at this particular juncture, Flint is going to be hyper aware of Sylvie trying to get inside his head and pull his strings, but at the same time, Sylvie has really kind of shown his cards and shown to Flint the degree to which he is able to manipulate him, and the degree to which he's tired of doing that. And of course, Sylvie has shown his own vulnerability. And that means that you're now able to get scenes such as these in which Sylvie is truly able to speak his mind, and Flint is going to be able to take him on face value more so than he possibly ever was before, as a direct result of knowing what it is that Sylvie is all about. So when Sylvie is having this conversation, Flint is able to take him on face value in a way that he probably wasn't able to before. He doesn't have to have his guard up as much because Sylvie has made it quite clear that at this particular juncture, not only would I be an idiot to try to manipulate you again, but I really don't have anything to gain from that. So the progress that Billy referenced earlier has been true progress. It hasn't been a case of Sylvie, finding a way just to deal with Flint. It's having genuinely become close to Flint. And oh my god, for Sylvie to deliver that line to Flint saying, I understand the allure of having the men not think that you're the villain you fear you are, that really struck a chord with Flint. And it truly shows the vulnerability both of these men have with one another, that they're able to let their guard down and have the other person tell them their shit stinks with regards to things that are just so personal and things that are so cerebral and introspective. Cannot believe that a show about pirates is this deep. Man, I tell you, the patrons really did us all a solid by begging the girls to watch this show, because it resulted in me being able to see something that's so complex and so engaging every step of the way. Again, that line, the villain you fear you are. And I referenced in the previous episode's review, the duality that's been there for so long now between Flint and James McGraw, and kind of which one is which, and where does one man end and the other begin, in a way that, in comparison to Better Call Saul, is one that is a lot, in a way, maybe even more complex than that duality between Jimmy McGill and Saul Goodman. In a way that, God, there's just been so many shows we've watched now that has to do with the duality of identity. And I would really say, in some ways, it's not necessarily that Flint and James McGraw is more complex than any TV show I've ever seen. It's just that each one of them is complex in a different way. That, the duality of Flint and James McGraw compared to Jimmy McGill and Saul Goodman, compared to Walter White and Heisenberg, compared to Elliot Anderson and Mr. Robot, is each one of them have given us a depiction of it's not the duality of man, it's just, again, the duality of identity, and what identity is, and what it is to have this mask that you end up sinking yourself into. That the more you wear the mask, the more the mask wears you. I'm in love with every single aspect of it. I truly, truly am. This is a small detail leading up to the court scene, but I do also just want to mention the fact that we have the reveal of Ben finding the knife before the court scene and not afterwards is just so important, because if it were to come up afterwards, then it would be, for me, I would view that as very contrived, in that they were trying to be maybe a little bit too ambiguous with Flint's intentions there. I mean, a show like Black Sails would be able to pull that off, I think. I'm comparing it to other kind of lesser shows where if they were to, towards the end of the episode, have Flint say to Sylvie, I didn't actually bring the knife with me. It, to me, would have felt a bit inorganic and a little bit shoehorned in. So I think the fact that the show went out of their way to have it happen beforehand makes it a lot more effective for us as an audience member. Because again, it then also creates a sense of tension of saying, oh, well, if things end up, if it hits the fan, basically, and Flint is now in a violent situation, he can't properly defend himself in the way we thought he could, so there's a self-sacrificial element to it, which is interesting given the fact that so much of this was predicated on if he has the knife and he does put himself in harm's way, that's the self-sacrifice. So now the self-sacrifice is him not having the knife with him, and then of course on the more introspective existential level, there's the self-sacrifice of him willing to, put away the part of him that could be a Flint in this situation and speak more on the behalf of James McGraw, that concept, which again, it's a small detail, but I really, really love it. And again, frankly, even if they didn't have that detail, even if they did have Flint say, I didn't have the knife with me, for a show like Black Sails, it would have worked either way. So, the completely electric scene in which Flint is speaking to the Queen about the plan not to defend themselves from Nassau, but to actively fight Nassau, to take back control in a way, I suppose, not dissimilar to what Vane was talking about, but of course coming from a different direction for different reasons, is, to me, I think a scene like this might actually serve as one of the best microcosms for the entire series, even though I haven't finished it yet, and I'm only halfway through season 3. But I think a scene such as this is one of the greatest scenes underlying. It's one of the greatest scenes that highlights the overarching themes of the show with regards to historical context, with regards to the general theme of hierarchy, that what so much of this comes down to is going to be power, and it's going to come down to money. It's going to come down to the fact that England are the ones holding the whip, and everyone else is the one getting hurt by the whip. Everyone else are the ones who, again, it's to do with hierarchy, and it's to do with capitalism, and it's to do with, these are the men who are putting the work in order for there to even be a slave master to begin with. That were it not for them, England would not prosper. That were it not for the efficacy of the slaves and the labourers, and indeed the pirates to a particular degree, that England cannot survive. So, to see just how many lives have been destroyed by this sort of dynamic existing to begin with, I think is so well encapsulated in this dialogue. I think that, again, I think there's no other way of putting it, just saying that this truly just gets at the driving force of the entire show, of what the show is trying to talk about. And again, it does, of course, it's a reinforcement of where Flint is as a character and all that sort of stuff, of course, that goes without saying, but for them to have so much of what the show is about just presented so cleanly and so directly and with so much anger, I loved it so much. I'm completely in awe of a show like this, I truly am. Next, we have a scene in which Vane and Teach learn that the fragments down here, with the burned fragments, have to do with, invoices have to do with letters of what the men may have been planning were they to invade Nassau. And given the fact that Teach himself very plainly says to us that there's really nothing to go off of here, unless, of course, we were willing to attack Nassau. And, of course, that's very much planting the seed. It's planting the seed as a direct result of what had been established in our first scene with Vane, and again, that conversation with the Spanish captain about how we're all made sheeps by the control of money. And if Nassau to Vane represents stability amidst what he could possibly achieve with Teach, then it's clear that Nassau hasn't left his mind. That it could be a case of my interpretation here being that Nassau could still be a spectre haunting Vane in a way separate from Elle herself. But of course, I think it's more likely that the show is going to go for the idea that this is actually Vane having a bit of a stumbling moment, in which something like a plan to take Nassau is going to appeal to him kind of on an unconscious and emotional level that he himself will try to repress to the best of his ability. But in either case, I think that this scene here presents itself as a bit of a crossroads, that Vane is either going to have to put his faith into Teach at this moment, and in a way in himself at this moment, or he's going to go back to the comfortable familiarity of wanting to go with Nassau. Nassau being that which he cannot leave behind, and for that to be a location, not just like a person or an idea, an actual location, something so tangible, is a really, really compelling motivation for this character, which I really enjoy seeing. So we get a great inciting incident for the governor and Elle in the following scene, brought to us with the red-haired woman who we find out is actually a spy who, long story short of it, the jig is up. There's no way that they'll be able to take the hidden cache of money without either giving every single bit of it back alongside the extra half that has now gone missing, or I suppose a war is going to come as a result of all this. And again, the show does another great bit of scene transition. I don't know, again, I'm still trying to find out the correct term for it. Is it expository transition, where what's said at the end of one scene leads directly into what is then shown in the next scene, where they're talking about having to find the second half, and then we directly see Jack and Anne. I don't think there's a huge amount to say about that scene, other than, again, it's going to be a great setup for the plot point in the following episode as to what it is they can do now that their hands are pretty much tied. We thought that everything had been resolved in a way that even led to Elle and Governor kissing, but then of course now this has occurred. So I thought it built a great deal of tension, and again it did a very clear job of setting up what our plot point is going to be in the following episode. Next, we had the scene with Jack and Anne, and as illustrated from my reaction, my god, how stupid can Jack be? Oh, and I know it comes from a place of he has lost a lot, and it has been a difficult time for him, and he has placed so much on the basis of him securing his legacy, but no good can come from this. I wouldn't say that that's a fault of the writing or anything like that. I think my frustration does not come from the writers coming up with this storyline. It just is directly at Jack. And I mean, if I was in Jack's position, having gone through everything Jack has been through and understanding how he thinks, then I would be tempted to make the same decision. But you cannot help but just be completely on Anne's side at this particular juncture. You can't help but just completely empathize with her proclivity to just be like what the fuck, like, we just left, we just got out of this, and now you want to bring yourself back into harm's way. I was gonna joke and say the big Walter White head on him for doing that, but yeah. Oh, Jack, what are we gonna do with you? And as for our final scene, in which Flint makes it very clear to Sylvie what the plan moving forward is. First of all, I think there was a great resolution. I think there was a great emotional catharsis to the ending there of Sylvie saying, I didn't think this was going to work, but you really surprised me, in as many words saying, I'm proud of you. And Flynn saying, I was just as surprised as well. And he thanks Sylvie for opening that door. The mutual understanding that these men have of each other now is just really compelling to see. There's been so much growth, both for them as individuals and as a partnership, that is I just love it so much. It just feels we are in a completely different place now than we were at the beginning of season 2. And again, so much of that legwork has been put in the last 4 episodes that I'm just engaged the whole way through. And then of course we get the ending section where Flint is making it clear exactly what is set for them now going forward, and there was almost with Sylvie, it looked like almost there was a bit of apprehension there that he can't believe that this is the road we're going down, but of course it is the road we're going down. I think that there's not much else I have to say. The ending scene is pretty much exactly what it says on the tin. There is a significant amount of hype now moving forward for the final 5 episodes of the season, now that we're officially at the midpoint, not just with regards to the actual episode count, but from a seasonal arc point of view, they really stuck the midpoint well. And yeah, there's not much more else I have to say about that. Absolutely loved this episode. I truly, truly did. Like I said, that court scene with Flint it stands out as serving as a very strong microcosm for the overarching theme of hierarchy and capitalism and the working man for the show. And that's pretty much it. Thank you so much for watching this review, and if you've made it all the way to the end of the review, then I'm going to award you with an interesting fact. So you're no doubt familiar with the concept of two significant historical events being way closer in terms of year span than one would initially assume, and probably one of my favorite examples of that is the fact that the Wright brothers' first flight with the first prototype of an airplane took place in 1903, and then the very first moon landing took place in just 1969. Like such a short amount, like less than 70 years later, we went from inventing the very first rudimentary airplane to landing on the moon. And that is a time span that is so short that Eugene Aldrin, who would have been Buzz Aldrin's father, he was alive to witness the very first airplane, the very first basic airplane take flight, and within the same span of his lifetime, he saw his son land on the moon. That is a really interesting fact that I just love. And that's where the video ends. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.